So here I have a Nissan NV200 electric van. Obviously the same van is an NV200 in combustion engine form, and in this video I'm just going to look at the seat wear, which is very common on these, and how I'm going to repair this seat. So seat wear on these vans is very common, and it's because of the height of the seat and the overall height of the van. If the seat was higher, you would use the step when you get out, and if it was lower when you would get out, your bum wouldn't slide across the bolster on the seat. But because these seats are that sort of in-between size, they suffer from excessive wear on the bolsters here. So normally wear on a seat like this is a dead giveaway that the van has done a lot of miles, but that's not the case on these NV200s. Of course, it does depend on what it's being used for. For example, if this was a multi-drop delivery van where the driver's getting in and out the seat many times a day, you can get wear like this in as little as sort of 10,000 miles or so. This particular van is only 2 years old and has done 26,000 miles, and that is genuine. But as you can see in this case, this seat has worn on the bolster and the metal frame is under here, and simply the cushioning just isn't enough, and it wears where that foam is being compressed against the metal frame on the bolster here. So in this video, what I'm going to do is take the seat out and show you how I repair these using the genuine, very expensive Nissan parts. So the first thing you need to do is tilt the backrest forward and then slide the seat as far forward as you can so you can get to the rails at the back. And then just there and there, got to take the 2 bolts out of the sliding rails, and they require a T50 Torx. And then you slide the seat all the way back, and then you can remove the 2 bolts on the front of the rails there, and again that's a T50 Torx, or you can use a 16mm socket. Because the seat has an airbag in it, next we need to disconnect the negative terminal here from the 12-volt battery, and just give it a few minutes before we disconnect that seat. And then with the bolts out, we can lift the seat up here, and then you can access the wiring underneath. I've already disconnected this, but you then disconnect the connectors and pull this clip out from the bottom of the seat, which is just retaining that wiring loom. In this case, this seat doesn't have a heated panel, a heater in the seat, so it's just these 2 connectors. But if your seat is heated, then the wiring loom will have more connectors than that. And now we can lift the seat out, which I'm going to do off camera because I need 2 hands for that. But just be careful that you don't scratch the door card with the metal rails. So next we can start working on this seat, and you need quite a large area because you need to tip this seat around. And as you can see in this case, I've got it on some white sheets, and I'm using the trailer here as a workbench because you need quite a large clean area, and these sheets are going to keep the seat clean but also stop me scratching the bed of the trailer with those metal seat rails. And before, when I've done these, I've just taken the seats home and done it on the lounge floor on the carpet, because that was a lot easier than trying to find some space in the workshop, and nothing was ever clean enough to work on these, because you don't then want to stain any of the other fabric which you're not replacing. So now the parts that you need, and this is where it gets very, very expensive. So there are 4 basic parts to these seats. There is the foam on the backrest underneath the fabric cover. There is this fabric cover for the backrest. There is this separate fabric cover for the seat base, and then there is the foam under the seat base. In this case, on this seat, I'm replacing the base fabric cover and the foam cushion underneath it. And I'm not touching the backrest one because this is all good here. But if it was an older van, sometimes this bolster here can go, and the metal frame can be sort of pushing through the worn foam. So in the past I have done both that base and the bottom, and it gets very, very expensive. And that's because these genuine Nissan parts are unbelievable prices. So as I said, there's 2 parts. So this is the base foam, and this particular one is the non-heated version. So you've just got your foam base. If it was the heated version with the heated seats, you will have a heater pad here. That's quite a bit more money, but what I found is you can remove the heater pad from your existing heat and just stick it down onto a normal foam cushion to save some money. That is if your heater pad here is fully working. And I've just stuck it down with some spray carpet glue, and it works perfectly fine because it's all being held in place, of course, by the fabric cover, and it's not going to move. You could even use tape, something like gaffer tape actually, to hold it down. So in the past I've always used the base foam and reapplied the heater pad if needed. So the part number for a base foam without the heater pad is 87311BJ00A. So from Nissan, this cost £114 including VAT, and you can get this and any of the parts from your local Nissan dealer, and the parts department can order them in for you. So it is a lot of money for a block of moulded foam, but obviously it's unique to this particular model of vehicle. But inside here there is a bit of embedded metal. There's a metal rod, well, a metal wire should I say, all around there, and that's what we're going to attach the fabric cover to. And then you've got a hole here, and that's where you put your electrical connection through if you've got a heater pad there. And there's nothing of any interest on the back there. But if you've got anywhere in your seat fabric, the cushion underneath along here is always going to be damaged. So you're always going to have to replace a cushion if there's any noticeable wear, because that foam just deteriorates underneath with the wear of your bum sliding over. So the fabric is going to show it worst and first, but the foam underneath is always going to be damaged. And if you go into the effort of replacing the fabric, you've really got to replace the foam as well. So next, the fabric cover. There are different versions of this depending on what colour your fabric is. So this is from the later NV200 van, and it's all black basically. A black plain fabric there, and then a different section here with a very light sort of dark grey fleck, and the same up here. The earlier versions of the NV200 van, this part was a lighter grey, and this was black with a more of a silvery fleck. I've just got to make a small correction here. The seats in the earlier Nissan NV200 didn't have a silver fleck in the black fabric section. And those earlier seats are cheaper to buy, the fabric covers, than these later seats. And I suspect the combustion version of the NV200 has different fabrics as well. The colours will probably change, but anyway, I've only ever dealt with the electric versions. So this is a later vehicle with the black seats, and the base cover only is this part number, 87320BE45B. And if I just take that out of the bag, it is just a few bits of fabric sewn together. You've got the sort of felt sides here, and they always sort of look rather worn. So that's nice and smooth again, so it does make a nice job. You've got your front section here with the fleck in it. You've got these plastic bits around the side that wrap over and clip to the base of the seat frame. And then on the underside, you've got some plastic edges here, which that is what we're going to tie into the foam in a minute. So it is just a few bits of fabric sewn together. So what do you think that should cost? I would look at that and say it should be about 50 quid, maybe 60 or 70 quid at the most. But here's my invoice for that seat cover, and with the VAT, that is £405.96, and that's with a bit of a trade discount as well. So these are absolutely extortionate prices. So from Nissan, just to buy these two parts, you're looking at 520 quid, which is absolutely ridiculous. But if your seat's even more worn and the bolster on the back is worn, and you've got to replace those two bits, you're effectively doubling the cost. So you're looking at £1,000 just to retrim the seat. So what's your alternative? Well, you can't buy these parts anywhere else. They're unique to the vehicle, and no one else is making these items. So you could go to a seat retrimmer or an upholsterer, but they're not going to have this exact same fabric, but they will have some black or grey fabric that will be a similar match probably, and they could sew in another bit here, and maybe they could build up the worn foam with some other foam and glue something in. I don't know, I haven't used them. But would it cost anything less? I doubt it, for the amount of time that it's going to take to do that, because they've still got to take it apart. So I suspect you're not going to save too much money, and because I'm retailing vans, they've got to look really good. So I haven't gone down that route of using an upholsterer. I'm just replacing with the original parts, as you can see, because it's all going to look new and proper. So what's your other option? Well, you could buy a complete used seat off eBay, usually from car breakers, and that will be a seat that's come out of a crashed vehicle. But every time I've gone to find one of these, I haven't been able to find another seat that was available at the time I wanted one in the right colour fabric. And also most seats from used NV200s will be in a similar condition to yours. They're going to be worn. So if you're going to buy a used seat, it's got to be from a very low mileage vehicle that won't have the same wear. And it's likely, even if you can't see wear in the fabric, it's likely that the underlying cushion on the bolster here is going to be crumbling away underneath, and you might find when you get your new seat it's not as good as you thought it was, unless it's out of a very low mileage vehicle. But a complete used seat would probably cost you 200, maybe 250 quid, including delivery, and obviously that's a lot cheaper than buying the parts and retrimming it yourself. But unfortunately, every time I've gone to look for a seat, I haven't been able to find one at the time in the right condition and in the right colour combination. And we also need some tools, and that's primarily to attach the fabric to the foam, and that is attached to these wires that are inside the foam. And you need what's called hog rings for this, with some hog ring pliers. So initially when I was doing these seats, I probably did 3 or 4 of them without those, and I was just using pliers to remove the existing hog rings, or they're just wire loops, like wire rings. And I was removing the existing ones by bending them with pliers and then refitting them afterwards. But that is incredibly difficult. The refitting them afterwards really is awkward. It's very difficult to get pliers down in there and close the metal rings back up, because this is very thick, stiff wire. And I really struggled doing it. It's a horrible job. And then I discovered what these wire loops were, and they're called hog rings. And I bought the proper pliers, and that's made the job an awful lot easier. So I'll put links to these in the video description below. You can buy a set on Amazon for about 15 quid or less, which includes some pliers and some metal rings. These particular pliers are the Sealy ones, so they cost a bit more money, but because they're at an angle, I thought they might be a bit better, but I think these only cost about £16. And these are 3/4 inch hog rings. And they're just a wire. And these are used by upholsterers, but they're also used when you're doing wire fencing. And you put the open wire ring in the pliers there, and when you're trying to attach the fabric to that wire down there in the foam, you just squeeze this, and then it makes a closed loop like that. So that's why it's better to buy the proper tool and to buy some new rings, because trying to open that with pliers and then reclose that all at the same time, fighting with the fabric and trying to get it tucked right down in there, is really hard work. So for the cost, just buy the right gear. So now for the actual job, how do you do this? Well, this is one of those jobs which looks quite simple, and you look at how that's fixed and you think, well, that's going to be a 5-minute job, but it's actually a lot more difficult than it looks. It's really awkward, but it's all doable with minimal tools. But it is worth wearing gloves because you will cut your hands on the metalwork, and it's quite frustrating. And I've probably done, I don't know, what have I done, 7 or 8 of these now, but I haven't done one for about 2 years, so I have sort of forgotten, so I'm going to have to familiarise myself as we go along with this video. So when you first start, it's worth tipping the seat up and taking a few pictures with your phone, because you need to remember how all of this attaches, because it's easy to forget by the time you're at the end of the job. So 90% of the viewers of this channel are not subscribed. I'm sorry to ask, but it would help greatly if you would. Just press the subscribe button. It's free and it shows YouTube you like this sort of vehicle related content. If you want to be notified when new videos are released, please click on the bell button also. Thank you, it really helps more than you would imagine. So one of the most awkward parts of this job is getting this foam base off the seat frame, and that is because you've got this lump at the back which is going through this gap underneath the upright part, and it sticks out on the back of the frame, and that gap is just too tight. And you look at this and think, well, that's a squeeze enough to pull that out. And actually you can pull it out, but getting it back in is difficult, particularly with the fabric cover on and keeping it all aligned up. And it's just really awkward. And the last time I did one of these, I was struggling so much to get that back in. I took all the plastic work off both sides and loosened the bolts that hold the backrest, and deassembled the actual seat frame just to get this cushion back in that gap there. So the first part of this job is just to get this seat base off the seat frame. And to do that, we've just got to unclip all 4 edges. And that is just this plastic channeling that's stitched on all 4 parts of the fabric. So all 4 edges. And that is just looping round and just gripping the metal edges of the seat frame. So this is one of those things where you need to remember how it went first. So do take pictures with your phone, but you're just going to have to get your fingers in here and twist it out and unclip all the edges. So this front fabric is the easiest one to attack first. So you can lift that up and you can see how the plastic channel there hooks round. So this is just a case of pulling it off this way. And you're just pulling it off that wire that's going between the 2 seat rails. So now when it comes to the sides, they're actually hooked round on the outside of the seat rails on a continuation of this wire. And it's not on the metal base here, because if you look on the inside, the fabric or the plastic hook isn't there. So this wire continues round here and it's hooked along there. So if this is getting awkward, of course you're replacing this seat cover, so you can destroy this. So you could get some scissors or a knife up here and cut all of this, just so you can get your hands in there and pull it off, because of course we're replacing all of this. So I'm going to cut the fabric here just to make my life a bit easier. And then with the fabric cut, you can see the plastic there that you've got to get off the rail, and you can get your fingers in there and separate that a bit easier, because you can now see what you're doing. And because this is the side that is wearing away, this foam really does get crumbly and it will make quite a lot of mess as you take it apart. They're often a lot worse than this. So you might want to vacuum this up as you go along, because it does create a lot of foam dust. And then on this side of the seat, we've got to remove the fabric from this rail. Again, it's the same plastic, but it's worth taking some pictures with your phone so you know which way round that goes, because it loops around and pulls in from the top. And also take some pictures of this, because we've got these other fabric tabs here, and it's worth taking some pictures so you remember how those go back. And then on the underside, we've got this bit of fabric which is coming from the back of the seat cover. So again, take a picture so you can see how this is attached. But that's just hooked on these metal bits on the seat frame, and then under that we've got another strap with another piece of fabric that's hooked down there, so take a picture of it and you can see which way it goes round that wire assembly there. So with that all removed, we can then see we've got the final bit of plastic to remove off this wire down here. And we can now start trying to squeeze the back of this foam cushion to get it through that gap so we can pull the seat base out that way. But I've just noticed on my seat here, this back fabric cover isn't right and it's not clipped together. So I can't remember exactly how these goes. I think this plastic must hook round into that plastic channel, I guess, because there isn't metal that can hold on to. So yeah, this one has come apart on mine, so I've got to fix that. But anyway, I'll do that when this is out of the way. The next thing you're also going to want to do is to release the fabric from under this cover, and from memory there's a plastic trim clip in here which we can pop open by leaving this up. So with a plastic tool or a flat blade screwdriver you can pop this up, and that fabric is over a clip there which you can then release that. Or if you're destroying this, obviously you can just cut it and get it off, and then you can remove this little bit of fabric that's left afterwards. So with this bit of fabric freed from here, you can now pull the seat cushion up and you can see that it's all free to come out, and we've just got to squeeze that lump at the back through that gap there. And as I said, that's easier said than done. So that's actually squeezed through much easier than I can remember. I think the issue is putting it back, not taking it out. As I said, it's been a long time since I've done one of these seats. So with that squeezed through, I still can't release this foam cushion because there is a loop on the back there. And if I look at the original one, it's this loop here. So you could obviously just cut this with scissors just to get this off quickly, but the new one's got to go back in. And what this is this is your airbag wire, because there's an airbag up in here, and that is looping through this fabric loop on the back. So we've got to unclip this from the base, thread it through, and then when the new cushion goes back on, thread that back through the loop. So you don't really want to cut the cable ties here off the wire. You want to try to pull that whole cable tie clip off the seat base, because you might be able to save them. That one I can re-clip in, that one did break. But anyway, when you're done, you can just tie this back up with a normal cable tie. And then we've got to take the connector off the base, and if you lift the seat cover up, you can then just squeeze the clip with a pair of pliers, which will then pull all of that off, because that's just held in with those two prongs. So with this airbag wire now out of that loop, we're getting a bit closer to getting this seat cover out, but there's something else holding it on the other side, and that's because this fabric is being held with another clip on the underside of this bit of plastic. So if you lift that plastic up, that's under there, we can now release the fabric from there as well. And then that's the dirty old seat out, and then you're going to want to vacuum all this foam dust up. So now with the foam removed, you can see the steel seat frame, and you can see why this bolster wears, because this is quite a narrow pinch point here, and this is where your bum is sliding off the seat here, and this is quite a narrow bit of rolled steel, and it's sitting in this channel here. So as you can see, the foam has deteriorated here, And I suspect if this was wider and rolled over wider, or a bit more of a sort of flatter surface, it might not destroy the foam so easily. But really this foam needs to be a bit more denser and have a bit of strength under there. But anyway, that's why they wear, and they don't last very long on these Nissans. So now it's a case of putting it all back together, but first we've got to attach the fabric cover to the cushion, and we can see how it's done on this, and you can basically replicate it. But if you were replacing just the fabric and leaving the cushion behind, then you've got to remove this, and this is where it gets very awkward, and it's what I used to struggle with, because I used to try to undo these wire loops in here with pliers and reuse them. But if you have a look at this, we've got one loop there, one loop there, and one loop there. So it's now quite easy because you can put them side by side and replicate how it's done. And it's a case of, let me just move my phone, laying the cushion over, and this fabric is going to be going down in that channel, and you put a hog ring, just get one here out of the bag, you put a hog ring through the white fabric, so that's going to pierce a hole in the white fabric, loop round the plastic part here, and attach it to the wire that's down in the foam. So we're going to have one hog ring there, one hog ring there, and one hog ring there. And what I've done in the past is used a felt tip pen and just put a little line on the white fabric, so I know what I'm pinching when I'm getting the pliers down in there, because it's all sort of buried quite a bit. So we've got to attach 3 there, 3 there, 3 there, and 3 there. And that's just tying the fabric base down to the cushion. And if you had a heater pad, that would sit in there, and the wire and connector would go through the hole. And as I said, if you've got a heater, then you can take it off this cushion, peel it off because it's just stuck down with a bit of glue, and glue it back onto here just fine, and it works okay. So you can see now why I said you want to change the foam, even if it feels like the foam is okay under that fabric, because this fan is only 2 years old, and you can see how dirty this foam is. And obviously it's deteriorated here, but the foam is all breaking up on that bolster, and it's pretty grimy. I haven't got gloves on, I hope that's just sweat. But under that fabric cover, there's still a lot of dirt and moisture and stuff that gets absorbed in that foam. So the next job now is to attach the fabric cover to the cushion underneath. So if you lay that out at the top, we've just got to use the hog rings, and I've got one in the pliers already, and then that goes through the white tape or the white fabric around the plastic beading there, and then around the metal inside the foam. So I've already done the first one. You can make the hog rings pierce the white tape here, but it's quite thick fabric, so what I'm doing is punching a hole first with a bradawl, and then getting one side of the hog ring through that hole, which I now can't find the hole. There. And then I'm going to close the pliers up a bit. Then you've got to get that down in there and through the metal, which you really have to push down and do it blind, and just hope you've got it, which I didn't. That was a fail. So we need to get that one off. This is where I use the pliers, and these are quite stiff, this metal, it's quite strong. So let's start again. Also, these hog rings are quite wide for my Stanley pliers here. So a bit of a challenge to get into the pliers, so it's easier to use another pair of pliers to hold it. Right, let's try again. There, that is now attached. So we've got to do this 3 times on each edge. So that side is done, but I'm mistaken. At the back, it's not attached. So even though there is the wire down inside the foam cushion, there's no hog rings attaching the back. So it is only 3 sides that we're doing. So a close-up of what we're doing here is the hog ring down in there is looped around the black plastic and the wire inside the foam. So that is now attached to the foam base. So we can now fold the fabric cover over the cushion. Might require a little bit of stretching and a bit of manipulation. But we can get that over, give it a big push from underneath, but any creases will sort themselves out once it's all in place, particularly when you start sitting on it. And we can now put that back in the frame. So it's this back bit, I'll just tuck the foam up in there. It's this bit which has always caused me the problems. So I've just noticed actually there are 2 more hog rings, and that's on the underside of the cushion. So if you look at your original ones, we've got the fabric tab there and there attached to the foam. So we've got to attach that to that hole there and that hole there. And I don't think you're pushing in far enough to reach the wire on the other side, because I don't think that's attached to a wire in there. I think what there is something harder in there. I think there's a bit of supporting, or sorry, I should say strengthening material in there, maybe a bit of plastic or something. So we can just put a hog ring through there, and you can just about feel something that is not hard, but it's a bit harder than the surrounding foam. So just keep your hog ring open, loop it through like that, and you should get it. So I'll just make sure that's stretched over enough. You can put hog ring through the hole, into the hole, give it a good push, squeeze it, and there, that's attached. And then the same on the other side. So with that done, we can now put this seat base back on the seat frame. But the first thing you're going to want to do is put the airbag wire back through that fabric loop there. And then we've got to get this lump on the back of the cushion through that gap there. And that's what I've always struggled with. So if we look at the back, because of the angle of the backrest, we could probably increase this gap a little bit by tilting the seat base back. So with the seat back at that position, that sort of angle, that's giving us the maximum clearance between the seat frame and the backrest there, and it's a bit greater than the thickness of my fingers. So we can now try to push and pull that seat cover through that gap at the same time as squeezing that foam to get it through. And I've always struggled with this. As I said, sometimes I've ended up taking the seat apart, but this time the seat cushion came out much easier than it seemed it has done in the past, so maybe this one will work better. But anyway, that's the next job. I'm going to have to do it off camera because I need two hands to do that. So if there's any vehicle upholsterers watching this and you've got any suggestions or tips how to do this part, then let me know in the comments below, because you can obviously get the fabric through and you can pull that, but that's just going to pull that. We've got to squash that foam, and while you can get your fingers here and try to squash it, it's still pretty difficult, and you can't get your fingers in this bit. So what I probably need to do is sort of make up a tool, maybe with a bit of timber, and go in here to push this through from above the metalwork here. Something like a giant spatula or something. A thin bit of ply might do it. But as I said, I've really struggled in the past, so I've ended up taking all this apart and undoing the bolts and trying to separate the two to see whether that's any easier, but that's also not the easiest thing to do either. So I'm going to persevere with this off camera, trying to get that foam there through this gap here. And at the beginning of the video I said it's a good idea to wear gloves because you can cut your fingers. It hasn't been an issue up till now, and now I remember this is where you can cut your fingers when you're trying to get your hands in here amongst the metal, squeezing that foam. So I've been using this window ice scraper, going in from there, getting under the cushion and pushing that through. And I got a little bit through, but it's still difficult, and I got bleeding hands already. But considering how easy that seat foam came out, it's ridiculous that it's so awkward getting the new one back in. Also just note, you've got to get your airbag cable on the other side of this metal tube because it's coming from the back of the seat rest, so you want to do that at this point, probably while you've got a bit of space, and again that's where you can refer back to the pictures you've taken. So your airbag cable wants to be coming out like that because it's then going to loop around, so we can get that out of the way for now. And I suspect this is probably the easiest way of doing it, is put the seat on the floor like that, so you're working from the underside, and then you can get a hand here to squeeze that through and a hand here at the same time to squeeze that side through. But I felt like I was making some progress getting the foam through on the edges, and then one little touch it pings back and it hasn't gone through at all. So yeah, this is very challenging. I'm even using a breaker bar to get in here to try to squeeze that foam and push up at the same time. But you've got to be very careful you don't just tear the foam or push it through it or tear it along the seam. Still, it's slowly coming through, as you can see, but there's still quite a bit more to go. But I'm pulling on this, pushing my fingers in there, also using that breaker bar to sort of manipulate the foam up. It has sort of torn it a little bit, but not much, nothing to worry about. But I do wonder whether putting a bit of washing up liquid on the foam or on the underside of this metal tube would help, whether that would just stop it sticking and sort of make it slide through there a bit better. Anyway, it's too late for me to try now because I am making some progress, but it's very difficult. So that is coming through now. So all I'm doing is pulling on the fabric and just keep doing that, and slowly that has worked its way up and it's coming through. So that's looking like that is virtually there. So anyway, that's what's helped the best, and it's certainly easier from doing it with the seat this way and working at the base, which I don't think I've done before. So while I've got this up, I think I'm going to put this plastic trim on the wire here, and that will stop it going back. That's all ready now to do the rest of that, but we won't do that fabric until we've got the sides in. So what we've got to do on the sides is get that bit of fabric under there, under that, so it goes over that clip, so the clip can then push back into the hole on the metal frame. So what we've got to do is get that fabric under that plastic. So we've got that plastic clip in there, so we've just got to get that fabric flat so it goes underneath the plastic tab that's got the metal clip on the end. Let's use this one, it might be a bit better. There, like that. So what I'll do first is pull it down by putting the plastic onto the wire here, and this has got to go over and wrap around. So this is where you can refer to your photos to remind you how it goes, but I think we put it on like that and then twist it around, and that then stretches the fabric, and then with that flat we then push it back up so it clips onto the wire. Just push that in there. There. So you've got to have it flat, but that's wrapping around and then back up. So we've just got to make sure that this wire is all looking good, and then we've got to get that fabric pulled through so it's around the clip, and then we can stretch that back so that clips down, and that's that side done. So with the other side done, we now just got to clear up this fabric at the bottom, and this is where again you can refer back to your photos because it's easy to forget where this bit of fabric goes. So it doesn't feel like it's sewn on the right way. It feels like it should go that way, but before it was underneath. So I'm going to do it underneath again, and that was stretched down to there, and then this just hooks under there, and then we can put the airbag wire back. I'm going to have to put a cable tie round there and put that connector back in place. So it turned out that cable tie base isn't holding well enough, so I'm going to replace both of them with a simple cable tie. So before you put the seat back in the van, you might want to get the vacuum cleaner out again and get rid of any of this foam dust, the foam particles from the deteriorating foam, because it gets everywhere and sticks to the felt sides. And just make sure that your new fabric is all taut and all in place, and there's no creases. In my case, there's a few creases here, and as I was feeling around the front, I then realised I haven't pulled it taut and clipped it down with the plastic along the front, and it's got to then be pulled taut and clipped to this wire. So this is where you can refer back to your photographs to see how that goes. But I can put that on there, twist it round, it's going to do that twist, and that will pull this all taut, and it'll be ready to put back in the vehicle. And before you put your seat back in, it's a good opportunity to give your van a good clean, particularly under the driver's seat. That always collects a lot of rubbish. And I've got a dehumidifier running here because, as you can see, this van looks a lot better than it did at the beginning of the videos, and I've given these carpets a shampooing, and it's now drying with the dehumidifier. So obviously putting the seat back is very simple. It's just a case of doing it in reverse. The first thing you do is put the electrical connectors back in under the seat, and then the 4 bolts in the rails to hold the seat down to the box there on the floor, and then connect your 12-volt battery pack up. I'm not going to do it now because I'm still cleaning the inside of this vehicle and getting the moisture out of it. So I'll leave that video there for now. So if you found it useful, please do click the thumbs up, do subscribe to the channel, ask any questions in the comments below. If you can add any pointers, do that as well. And everything I've used, I'll put links in the video description below to the part numbers and where you can buy the tools on Amazon. The videos I make on this channel are primarily to help others and share knowledge. If you found a video helpful, please show your appreciation by at least clicking the thumbs up button, and leaving a comment also helps too, as does subscribing to the channel. All of this is free of charge. I do not use paid memberships or Patreon, which is how most YouTubers earn their money. I only earn from the YouTube ad commissions. But under every video on this channel is a super thanks button. So if you found a video particularly useful, or maybe it saved you money or time, then please consider a donation using the super thanks button. You could buy me a coffee, a pint, or contribute to the running cost of this channel. There's over 1100 videos on this channel now, so please have a browse, use the search, and have a look at the playlists.